many of us have heard the term SEO, but it can be difficult to really understand what all it encompasses and why it should matter to you and your organization. So SEO stands for search engine optimization, and it really encompasses a wide variety of things pertaining to your website. So from design to content to site speed and much, much more. SEO is the practice of optimizing all of those components, and those work together with the overall goal really of increasing the quantity and quality of your organic traffic. So organic traffic to your website just refers to non-paid traffic from search engine results pages, or SERPs. You'll hear that word a lot throughout this webinar. And it's just important to understand the value of organic traffic. It's extremely valuable because you earn it. You're not paying for that traffic. It's just people who find you through search engine searches. People who are engaged in searches typically are further down in the sales funnel, so they might be closer to actually taking an action, which is important. Those are the people you want to attract. And again, the end goal is for over half of your overall traffic to be organic. It's also important to distinguish what SEO is not. So we kind of touched on this already, right? SEO versus SEM. These are two terms that get kind of thrown around and maybe interchanged, but they're different. So SEM includes paid, while SEO is a part of SEM. SEM again includes paid efforts to increase your traffic conversions, etc. So while they can work in tandem, they're separate endeavors with different strategies and potentially different outcomes. Another difference is that SEM can sometimes garner quicker results. It's important to understand that SEO takes dedication and time and patience. So it's a long game, but it's well worth the effort. So the other thing, kind of like we just talked about, SEO is not magic. It's not quick, and it's not a replacement for really good, solid content. It takes time, but it can be really, really impactful. And it's also important to understand that there are sort of black hat tactics that are known industry-wide, such as paying for backlinks and other things like that. They're sort of rebuked in the industry, and they can potentially negatively impact your site. Google kind of has a leg up on those things and can understand when those endeavors are taking place. So it's important not to try to cheat the system, but to really just take your time and devote your energy to this, and it can pay off. So the main components of SEO, we kind of divided it into three sections. There's on-page, technical, and off-page. So on-page is the practice of optimizing the content on your site. So step one to this is having solid content. We don't want shallow content with very low word count, content that doesn't really mean anything or isn't engaging to users. So the first step is to really get solid content that, again, engages your users in a meaningful way. And then the second step to sort of this on-page component is optimizing things like headings, HTML tags, images, and design to, again, sort of make the technical or the SEO side of things optimized in a way that engages your users more readily. Technical SEO deals with the practice of optimizing your site performance. So this is where we get into things like site speed, how your site is crawled and indexed by search engines, and then something called schema markup and structured data. So these are sort of SEO tactics that are put into place with the goal of securing things like featured snippets and rich results. It's just another way to show up in a meaningful way and toward the top potentially in those SERP results. Off-page SEO is other reputable sites that link back to your site. So this has to do with backlinks. So if a major site, probably not a competitor, but a major site, something that's valid or makes sense in your industry, if they're linking back to your site, if your site is linked there, that's valuable. And that's part of your overall SEO, backlink profile. Off-page also deals with social media, guest blogs, and citations.
So now we're going to talk about some kind of considerations before we get into the details of some of these SEO essentials. We'll talk about some things you have to consider for SEO. We talked about this a little bit already, but content is huge. That is really most often the point of people searching is they're looking for certain content. So the quality of the content is important, the freshness of it, how often is it published or updated, and also the length. Really, for something to be have any chance of sort of ranking in the search results well organically, really the bare minimum word count you're looking at is about 400 words for a page. And if you want to be competitive in ranking for certain things that may have other people trying to rank for, really, a page needs more like 800 to 1600 words. So it's a lot more words than most people think, and that's very important. Google will sort of not necessarily penalize you for having thin content, but if you have a lot of it, they will. In fact, years ago, it used to be when you Googled almost anything, this website would come up called eHow. You probably have seen that. This website, like how to hang a picture or something, and they would have 20 pages on that one little thing, and each page would have one paragraph. So that website pretty much doesn't exist anymore at all in the search results because they were trying to use this tactic of just making tons and tons of pages with just like one sentence. And so content length is important. The ratio of code to content is important too. And making sure that your design works well with the content. And for SEO to really work well, there is a huge wide variety of skills needed, which is where sort of doing SEO completely internally to your organization can be really tough because you need good writers for good content, you need good designers, you need people coding the pages correctly. The web service you use is important. So it's this huge, complicated blend of skills. So, which is why it's fairly difficult. Um, SEO is also ever changing. It just never stands still, which is another thing. A very useful, valid technique from 6 months ago might not actually work anymore, or Google might be looking for something new. It's not new anymore, but when they switch to putting a lot more importance on mobile, that really caught people off guard. So just Google alone, and there's Bing and other search engines too, but we will focus mostly on Google. So Google alone updates their search algorithm more than 300 times per year, and usually has a few fairly large updates, which they actually name. So it's constantly changing, and also as new websites come online and publish new content, rankings for certain keywords and all of that, they're constantly changing. And also new devices come out, new technologies, new user preferences. All of this is sort of constantly changing, which is what makes SEO pretty difficult. We kind of say you need to have a gardener's mentality, right? If you plant a garden, you can't just plant a garden and then walk away and never look at it the rest of the year. You need to water it, you need to weed it, you need to fertilize it. So it's kind of like that. A few examples. I'll show just a couple examples too of what SEO can do for you. As Health Partners came to us to help with SEO years ago, and they didn't have a lot of content with their main site and kind of what they're doing. They basically are selling health insurance. They were really thin on this useful content that would rank well for SEO. So we created a network of websites, blogs on specific topics, and so that all drove traffic to their main site as well. And these sites could all be highly, highly SEO optimized without them kind of affecting their main site. So that worked out really well. Another one is Blue Sky, which I mentioned earlier. This is an online charter school that's free to students in the whole state. It's completely, free to the students. So they have over 40 page one rankings for keywords that matter to them. They also have won some featured snippets. So, when you Google something and Google just kind of gives you the answer at the top of the search results, which then in turn links to whatever that website is that kind of provides that answer. They call that a featured snippet, and that's incredibly powerful and can drive lots and lots of traffic to your site. So they have a few featured snippets, which is really awesome for important keywords to them. So Are regularly meeting their conversion goals and kind of regularly improving their rankings. It's kind of a slow, really upward climb, with SEO. Like we said earlier, it's not fast. Generally, things you're doing today, you may not see really affect anything dramatically for 3 to 6 to 8 months, maybe. So keep that in mind.